That antique just got us killed. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Cole's voice cut through the rain as he stared at the old brass compass in Lieutenant Emily Carter's hand, its scratched glass catching the last gray light of the afternoon. Around them, the Olympic forest had swallowed every trail, every landmark, every clean line of direction. Fog hung between the trees like wet cotton. The team's GPS screens blinked uselessly. The drone was gone somewhere above the canopy. The radios gave back only static, a thin white hiss that made the silence feel deeper. One seal sat on a fallen cedar with his ankle wrapped tight, trying not to show the pain on his face. Another kept checking the same dead map display, as if staring harder could bring the signal back. Ryan stepped closer to Emily, rain running from the edge of his helmet. "You hear me, Lieutenant? We followed your warning, we slowed down, and now we're standing in the middle of nowhere with a museum piece for a plan." Emily did not answer right away. She held the compass level in her palm, steady despite the cold. The needle trembled once, twice, then settled north. She looked at it the way some people looked at a photograph they had carried through too many years. There was no panic in her face, no embarrassment, no need to defend herself. Just that calm, distant focus that had irritated Ryan since morning. She was 5'6", pale-skinned, sharp-eyed, with rain darkening the loose strands of blonde hair beneath her cap. On her chest, barely visible under the wet edge of her jacket, was a small silver badge, a falcon curled around a compass rose. Most of the team had noticed it earlier and dismissed it as some personal charm. Ryan had called it cute. Someone else had laughed. Emily had simply adjusted the strap of her pack and kept walking. Now no one was laughing. 3 hours earlier, the exercise had started clean at the edge of the training range, 20 miles of rugged timber, ravines, and old logging paths north of the base. The mission was simple on paper. Move through the forest, reach a hidden extraction point before nightfall, and do it without leaving a readable pattern behind. Ryan had trusted the equipment. Everyone had. Military GPS, encrypted radios, a small reconnaissance drone, digital terrain overlays. The kind of gear that made old-school navigation feel like something from a dusty survival manual. Then Emily Carter had stepped out of the transport holding that compass, its leather cord worn smooth, its brass case dented along one side. Ryan had grinned in front of the whole team. "Lieutenant," World War II called. "They want their compass back." A few men chuckled. Emily only looked down at the needle, then up at the tree line. "Technology fails," she said. "North doesn't." Back in the rain-soaked present, Ryan remembered those words as the forest grew darker around them. Emily finally closed the compass cover with a soft click and looked past him toward a slope nobody else had noticed. "No," she said quietly. "That antique did not get us killed. It is the only thing here that still knows where home is." Ryan Cole did not like being corrected in front of his team, and he liked it even less when the person correcting him did it without raising her voice. That had been the first thing he noticed about Lieutenant Emily Carter that morning at the training compound. She never fought for space. She simply occupied it. While the others spread their equipment across the tailgate of the transport vehicle, checking batteries, syncing wrist displays, and testing encrypted radios, Emily stood a few feet away beneath the shadow of a pine tree, turning the old compass in her hand with the quiet care of someone handling something earned, not bought. The brass was worn thin at the edges. The glass had a long scratch running across it like a pale scar. On the back, half hidden by age and weather, were 3 small letters engraved by hand. WFC. Ryan had seen men carry lucky coins, old patches, family photographs, and once, a cracked watch that had stopped at the exact minute its owner survived a bad landing. Soldiers had reasons for the things they carried, but a compass on a modern navigation course felt like theater. "You really planning to use that today?" he asked, loud enough for the others to hear. Emily looked up. Her eyes were blue-gray, steady, unreadable. "Only if I need to." "That is what I am worried about," Ryan said, drawing a few laughs from the team. "We have satellite positioning, terrain models, and a drone overhead. This is not a Boy Scout weekend." Emily closed the compass gently and slipped it into the pocket near her silver falcon badge. "Then you should have no trouble getting us home." The answer was polite enough to pass inspection, but sharp enough to stay in the air. Petty Officer Mason Reed, the youngest on the team, hid a smile behind his canteen. Ryan noticed and gave him a look that ended it. Commander Nathan Hayes stood near the briefing table, watching the exchange without interrupting. He was a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s with the stillness of someone who had learned that silence revealed more than questions. His eyes paused for a moment on Emily's badge, then on the compass pocket, but he said nothing. The morning air smelled of wet cedar and diesel fuel. Beyond the compound fence, the Olympic forest rose thick and dark, miles of uneven ground, old ravines, cold streams, and logging cuts that no longer appeared on most current maps. The exercise was designed to be difficult, but controlled. The team would move from checkpoint to checkpoint, avoid marked hazard zones, and reach a concealed extraction site by 1700 hours. Ryan was assigned to lead navigation. Emily was attached as a mission observer. At least that was what the paperwork called her. To Ryan, that meant she was there to evaluate, not interfere. As the team stepped off the gravel road and entered the tree line, Emily took her place at the rear. She did not correct their path. She did not challenge Ryan's calls. She watched the canopy, the mud, the angle of broken grass where deer had crossed before sunrise. Every few hundred yards, her hand drifted near the compass pocket, not touching it, just checking that it was still there. Ryan moved fast and confidently, calling out headings from his wrist display. For the first 2 miles, everything proved him right. The signal was strong. The drone feed was clear. The route looked clean. Then Emily stopped beside a shallow depression where brown water gathered under fern leaves. She crouched, touched the mud with 2 fingers, and looked toward the ridge ahead. "This ground drained the wrong way," she said. Ryan turned back. "Meaning?" Emily stood slowly. "Meaning the map says the slope drops east, but the water is pulling south. Either the overlay is old, or the hill moved." Someone gave a low laugh, unsure whether she was joking. She was not. Ryan glanced at his display and shook his head. "The route is confirmed." Emily looked past him into the trees, where the forest had gone strangely quiet. Confirmed is not the same as true. Ryan held her gaze for a second too long, then turned forward. "We keep moving." Emily said nothing more, but Commander Hayes, walking near the center of the formation, looked back at the old compass pocket again. By the 3rd mile, the forest had changed from scenery into a wall. The training compound was no longer visible behind them, and the gravel road had disappeared beneath layers of moss, fern, and fallen cedar needles. The air grew colder under the canopy. Every sound seemed softened by wet bark and low fog. Ryan Cole kept the pace firm, one hand raised now and then to halt the team while he checked his wrist display. Each time the small screen confirmed his heading, his confidence returned a little stronger. "Checkpoint 2 is 800 yards ahead," he called back. "We cut across the ridge, follow the draw, and stay on schedule." Emily Carter heard him, but her eyes were on the ground. She had noticed 3 things in the last 10 minutes. The first was the water. It did not move the way the digital map suggested it should. The second was the wind. It came in short, cold pulses from the south, carrying the smell of rain before any clouds had darkened above them. The third was the birds. There were none. In a forest this large, silence was rarely empty. It usually meant something had shifted. Mason Reed slowed beside her. He was young, careful, and trying not to look like he was listening. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "do you think Chief Cole is wrong?" Emily stepped over a slick root before answering. "I think the land is older than his screen." Mason glanced at the compass pocket near her badge. "You learned that in survival school." Emily looked ahead at Ryan, who was pushing toward a narrow rise between 2 dark stands of fir. "Some of it." Her tone closed the door gently. Mason did not ask again. Up front, Ryan stopped near a split in the terrain. The left side climbed steeply through heavy brush. The right side dipped into a shallow ravine filled with smooth stones and dark water. His display pointed right. Emily arrived just as he signaled the team toward the ravine. "That channel floods fast," she said. Ryan did not turn around. "It is not raining." "It will." He exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled, the kind of patience men use when they want everyone to notice they are being patient. "Lieutenant, this route was built from current satellite terrain." Emily looked at the ravine floor. The stones were too clean. The lower branches were stripped bare on one side, all at the same height, as if water had combed through recently and hard. "Current from a screen," she said. "Not current from standing here." The team went quiet. Commander Hayes watched both of them without moving. Ryan finally faced her. You have made your point. You like old methods. I respect tradition. But this is my navigation lead. Emily held his stare. She did not challenge his authority. She did not step closer. Then lead them somewhere that gives them a way out. The words landed heavier than an argument would have. Ryan's jaw tightened. For a second, the only sound was the soft tapping of water falling from the branches. Then he turned and pointed down the ravine. We move. No one spoke as they followed. Emily waited until the last man entered the channel, then looked up at the gray strip of sky between the trees. A low rumble rolled far beyond the ridge. Mason heard it too. Was that thunder? Emily took out the old compass for the first time since they had entered the forest. The needle steadied quickly, but her eyes stayed on the ravine ahead. Not close enough to scare anyone yet, she said. Close enough to start counting. The ravine narrowed until the team had to move single file between slick stone walls darkened by years of runoff. Ryan Cole kept his eyes on the glowing line across his wrist display, stepping with the confidence of a man who still believed the machine would explain the land better than the land could explain itself. Behind him, the others moved carefully, boots pressing into shallow water that curled around their soles and carried small leaves past their ankles. The first drops of rain arrived without drama, tapping the shoulders of their jackets, making tiny circles in the water. Ryan glanced up once, then kept walking. Passing shower, he said. We will be out of this channel in 10 minutes. Emily Carter did not answer. She was watching the waterline on the rocks. It had risen half an inch since they entered. Not enough to alarm a classroom. Enough to matter in a ravine with nowhere wide to stand. She looked at the stripped branches along the sidewall, then at the angle of the stones underfoot. They were too smooth, too clean, all pointing the same way. This place did not carry water gently. It delivered it fast. Mason Reed slipped slightly, caught himself against the rock, and gave an embarrassed half-laugh. I am good, he said before anyone asked. Emily stepped beside him and pointed to a ledge above shoulder height. Keep your left hand near that shelf. If the water jumps, climb first and ask questions after. Mason's smile faded. You really think it could rise that quick? I think it already has. Up ahead, Ryan heard enough to stop. Lieutenant, you are making my team nervous. Emily looked past him to the bend where the ravine turned south. A faint roar had begun there, not loud yet, but steady beneath the rain. Your team should be nervous when the ground changes faster than the plan. Commander Hayes raised one hand, and everyone froze. He listened. The forest above them had gone from quiet to restless. Wind moved through the treetops in waves, and the rain thickened until it ran down the rock walls in thin silver threads. Ryan checked his display again. The blue route line flickered, corrected itself, then flickered once more. He tapped the screen with 2 fingers. Signal is bouncing off the walls. Give it a second. Emily opened the compass. The brass lid shielded the glass from the rain. The needle found north cleanly, indifferent to the ravine, the storm, and every failed assumption around it. She turned slightly, measuring the angle between the needle and the path they had taken. This channel is bending us too far south. Ryan shook his head. The extraction point is southeast. Not through here. According to what? Emily closed the compass and looked at the water curling faster around their boots. According to every mark this ravine has left behind. Before Ryan could answer, the radio on Hayes's vest crackled sharply. A broken voice came through, distorted and thin. Training control to Team 2, weather cell moving faster than expected. Be advised, possible interference with navigation systems. Repeat, possible interference. The message vanished into static. Everyone looked at Ryan's wrist display at the same time. The route line spun once, froze, then relocated their position nearly half a mile away from where they had been standing seconds earlier. Mason whispered, "That cannot be right." Ryan's face tightened, but he forced calm into his voice. "We hold position and reacquire." Emily was already looking upward, searching the ravine wall for the safest climb. "No," she said. "We get out of the channel now." This time, she did not say it like advice. She said it like a door closing. Hayes heard the difference. "Cole," he said, voice low. Ryan looked at the rising water, then at the dead certainty in Emily's eyes. For the first time all day, he did not argue. "Move up," he ordered. "Left wall. Use the ledge. Slow and steady. One by one." They climbed from the ravine onto higher ground as the rain turned hard behind them. When Emily was the last to step over the edge, the water below had already changed color, darker and faster, carrying branches through the narrow space where they had been walking minutes before. No one said thank you. Not yet. Pride was still louder than gratitude. But Mason Reed looked at the old compass in Emily's hand, then at the ravine below, and his face changed. He had begun to understand that she was not guessing. The higher ground did not give them safety. It only gave them a better view of how quickly the forest was taking control of the exercise. Rain moved through the trees in gray sheets, turning the slope beneath their boots into a slick skin of mud and needles. The ravine below filled with rushing brown water, swallowing the stones where the team had stood only minutes earlier. Ryan Cole watched it for half a breath too long, then looked away as if the sight had accused him. "We continue southeast from here," he said, forcing his voice back into command. "We lost time, but we are still inside the training boundary." He lifted his wrist display again. The screen flashed, recalculated, and showed 3 different headings in less than 10 seconds. Mason Reed saw it and said nothing. Nobody needed to. The drone operator tried to reconnect with the small aircraft, but the tablet gave back a frozen image of treetops blurred by rain. One of the radios chirped, then dissolved into static. Commander Hayes moved down the line, checking each man with calm efficiency, but his eyes kept returning to Emily Carter. She stood near a fir trunk, compass open in one hand, her other hand resting lightly against the bark as if she could feel direction through the tree itself. She was not looking at the device the way Ryan looked at his screen. She looked at it once, then looked outward. North was only the beginning. The answer was somewhere in the slope, the wind, the water, and the memory of the land. "Lieutenant," Hayes said quietly, "what do you see?" Ryan turned at the question. Emily did not hurry. She pointed through the trees toward a darker break in the timber. "That ridge should run west to east." "It does not. It curves south and drops into another drainage. If we follow Chief Cole's heading, we will keep losing elevation until we hit the old washout." Ryan stepped closer. "There is no washout on the map." Emily looked at him. "That is why it is dangerous." The words were not sharp, but they struck. Before Ryan could reply, a sound came from behind them, a short slip, a grunt, and the scrape of boots losing hold. Mason went down on one knee on the muddy slope, catching himself against a root. He was not badly hurt, but his face tightened as he reached for his ankle. Emily was beside him first. She did not make a scene. She checked the joint through the boot, pressed once, watched his expression, then wrapped the ankle with practiced speed from the small medical strip in her pack. "Can you walk?" she asked. Mason swallowed his pride. "Slower than before." Then we changed the route. Ryan looked at the sky, then at the sinking light beyond the trees. "We do not have time to wander." Emily stood, rain running down her face, her blue-gray eyes steady beneath the brim of her cap. Wandering is what happens when a man trusts a broken screen over moving ground. The team went still. Even the rain seemed to pause around the words. Ryan's face hardened. "You have been waiting to say that all day." "No," Emily said. "I have been hoping I would not have to." Hayes stepped between the silence before it could turn into something worse. "Cole, status of primary navigation." Ryan looked down at the display. For the first time, he did not pretend. "Unreliable." "Communications?" The radio operator answered. "Intermittent at best, sir. Training control is not holding." "Drone. Lost feed." Hayes nodded once, as if the truth was cleaner than denial. "Then we adapt." Ryan stared at the compass in Emily's hand. With that, Emily opened the brass cover fully. The old needle trembled in the storm, then settled with quiet authority. "With this," she said, "and with everything your equipment stopped noticing." She moved to the edge of the slope and studied the ground below. There were 3 possible ways forward. One looked easier, one looked faster, and one looked almost hidden, marked only by a faint lift in the roots and the way water avoided it. Emily chose the hidden one. "We go northwest for 200 yards, she said. "Then we climb. There is a dry shoulder above the drainage. It will feel wrong because it moves away from extraction first, but it gives us height, and height gives us options." Ryan almost laughed, but the sound never made it out. Behind him, the ravine roared louder, and Mason shifted his weight carefully on the wrapped ankle. Every modern tool they had trusted had gone quiet. The only thing still giving a clear answer was the old compass in Emily Carter's hand. Hayes looked at Ryan. "Chief, put the team behind her." Ryan held the order in his jaw for a second, then stepped aside. Emily passed him without triumph, without even a glance meant to wound. She simply moved forward into the rain, calm and exact, and one by one, the Lost SEAL team followed. Emily Carter led them away from the obvious path, and that was what made Ryan Cole hate every step of it. The route climbed into thicker timber, where the ground rose unevenly under a layer of soaked needles and black soil. It did not feel like progress. It felt like retreat. The extraction point was somewhere southeast, and Emily was taking them northwest, higher into the cold, away from every instinct Ryan had trusted since the exercise began. But the team followed because Commander Hayes had given the order, and because the ravine below them now sounded like a freight train hidden under the trees. Mason Reed moved near the center of the line, favoring his ankle, one hand on another man's shoulder when the slope steepened. Emily adjusted the pace without saying she was doing it. She chose firmer ground, avoided loose rock, and stopped only when the forest offered information. A torn patch of moss, a line of water beads leaning against bark, the faint bend of grass where wind had moved through an open cut above them. Ryan watched her with growing frustration, not because she looked uncertain, but because she looked too certain. She checked the compass, then the canopy, then the slope of the land, building a map in silence while everyone else carried dead equipment. 200 yards, Ryan said behind her, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "You said 200 yards before we climbed. We have gone at least 300. Emily stopped near a cluster of fallen branches and looked back. That was before Mason started limping harder. Mason looked down, embarrassed. Emily's voice stayed neutral. "The route changes when the team changes." The answer quieted him more effectively than an argument would have. Ryan looked at Hayes, but the commander gave no rescue. He only watched Emily the way a man watches a locked door after realizing someone else may have the key. The rain thinned for a moment, not stopping, just loosening its grip. Through the trees, a pale line appeared above them, a shoulder of higher ground. Emily pointed toward it. "There." Ryan stepped beside her. "That is not on the route overlay." "No," she said. "It is older than the overlay." They climbed the final stretch slowly. At the top, the forest opened just enough for the wind to hit them clean. The ground leveled into a narrow ridge covered in low brush and wet stone. From there, the world below appeared in broken pieces through the fog. The flooded ravine behind them, the darker drainage ahead, and beyond that, a distant gap between two ridgelines. Emily crouched and brushed rainwater from a flat stone. Under the mud was a rusted survey marker, barely visible, stamped with numbers almost worn away. Mason leaned closer. "What is that?" "Old forestry line," Emily said. "Pre-digital. Some of the Cold War training maps still used it." Ryan stared at her. "How would you know that?" Emily did not answer at first. She took out the compass, opened it, and aligned the brass edge with the ridge. Her thumb moved over the old engraved letters on the back. WFC. Commander Hayes saw the gesture. Something in his expression changed, small but unmistakable. Recognition, or the beginning of it. Ryan missed it. He was too focused on Emily. "Lieutenant, I asked you a question." She looked toward the distant gap, where the fog moved differently, pulled sideways by open air. "Because 10 years ago, a team got lost in country that looked just like this. No signal, no clean map, no room for pride. The man who taught me said the land always leaves a second language for people humble enough to read it." The team fell silent. Even Ryan had no quick answer. Emily stood and pointed down the ridge. "That gap leads to the old service road. The road bends east, then south. It will add a mile, maybe more, but it keeps us above the water and gives Mason solid ground." Ryan looked at the compass, then at the fog, then at the faces of his team. He could still challenge her. He could still demand the route he had planned. But the screens were blank, the sky was closing, and Emily Carter had just found a marker nobody else had known existed. Hayes stepped closer, his voice low enough that only Ryan and Emily heard it. "Chief, from this point forward, she calls the path." Ryan's pride fought him for one last second. Then he nodded once. "Understood." Emily did not celebrate. She only turned toward the ridge, lifted the old compass to chest height beneath the silver falcon badge, and started walking. Behind her, the team followed in a straighter line than before, not because the forest had become less dangerous, but because someone finally knew how to listen to it. The ridge carried them farther than Ryan Cole expected, and that bothered him almost as much as being wrong. For nearly half a mile, Emily Carter moved through the storm with the old compass held low in her left hand, and the terrain unfolding before her like a memory returning piece by piece. She never rushed. She never asked anyone to trust her. She simply chose the next 10 yards correctly, then the next, and after a while the team stopped looking at their useless screens and started watching her shoulders. When she slowed, they slowed. When she stepped left around a patch of soft ground, they followed without question. When she paused to listen to the wind moving through a break in the timber, no one spoke over it. Mason Reed noticed it first. The team was no longer reacting to the forest. They were moving with it. The rain had softened to a steady mist, but the cold stayed sharp, settling into gloves and collars. Downhill, water kept roaring through channels they could no longer see. Emily led them along the ridge until the ground dipped toward a stand of old hemlocks, their trunks wide enough to hide a man standing behind them. At the base of one tree, half covered by moss, she found another marker. Not metal this time, but stone, squared by human hands and carved with a faded arrow. She brushed it clean with 2 fingers. Commander Hayes crouched beside her, and the moment he saw the symbol beneath the moss, his expression changed again. It was not surprise anymore. It was confirmation. "Where did you learn this route?" he asked quietly. Emily kept her eyes on the marker, from a man who did not believe in new maps until he had walked the old ones. Hayes looked at the silver falcon badge on her chest, then at the engraved letters on the back of the compass. WFC. This time, Ryan saw the commander's face. "Sir?" Ryan asked. Hayes stood slowly. Rainwater traced the edge of his jaw. "Chief, do you know what that badge means?" Ryan glanced at Emily's chest, then away, suddenly aware that he had dismissed it too easily. "I thought it was personal." "It is," Hayes said, "but not the way you think." Emily closed the compass halfway, as if the conversation had gone somewhere she had not invited it to go. Hayes continued anyway, his voice low, firm, and heavy with memory. 5 years ago, a joint reconnaissance team lost navigation in the mountains during a winter training rotation overseas. Weather shut down the air support. Their digital maps were corrupted. Visibility dropped below 20 yards. They had 2 injured men, no clean signal, and terrain that kept pushing them into the wrong valley. The team listened now with the kind of silence that does not need an order. Ryan's eyes moved from Hayes to Emily. She had turned slightly toward the trees, but she did not tell him to stop. The official report said they returned because of emergency regrouping procedures, Hayes said. The unofficial version said one officer walked them out with an old compass, a memory map, and enough nerve to ignore every bad assumption around her. Mason looked at Emily with open disbelief. "That was you." Emily's answer came after a pause. "It was a team effort." Hayes almost smiled, but there was sadness in it. "That is what she wrote in the report, too." Ryan said nothing. Every joke from the morning came back to him in pieces. The museum comment, the Boy Scout line, the way he had looked at her compass like it was a toy in the hands of someone trying to prove she belonged. He had mistaken restraint for weakness. He had mistaken silence for uncertainty. Emily opened the compass again and checked the needle. "We still need to move," she said. "The service road is close, but the fog will thicken in the low ground." Hayes nodded. "Lead on, Lieutenant." This time the words carried more than permission. They carried recognition. Emily stepped past the old stone marker and descended along a narrow natural shelf hidden beneath the ferns. Ryan waited until she passed, then fell in behind her instead of ahead of her. It was a small change. No announcement. No apology yet. But everyone saw it. In the gray light of that wet forest, the command line had shifted, not by rank, not by volume, but by competence. The woman they had doubted was now the reason they still had direction. The descent from the ridge was narrow, hidden under ferns and low branches, the kind of path a person could stand beside all day and never see unless they already knew it was there. Emily Carter moved first, placing each step where the roots held firm and the mud had not broken loose. Behind her, Ryan Cole followed with a quiet he had not carried before. He watched how she used the compass only in brief glances, never staring at it for answers it was not meant to give. The needle gave her north. The forest gave her everything else. She read the slope by the way water slid across the leaves. She read the wind by the way mist curled between the trunks. She read distance by sound, pausing once when the rush of the flooded ravine faded behind them and a thinner, steadier noise appeared ahead. "Creek," she said. Mason Reed lifted his head. "I do not hear it. You will in a minute." 50 yards later, the sound reached them all, a narrow stream running over stones somewhere below the fog. Emily stopped before the ground dropped too sharply and raised one hand. The team halted at once. No one asked why. That alone would have been impossible 2 hours earlier. She crouched near the edge, studied the flow, then pointed along the bank. "We do not cross here. The bed is cut too deep. We follow upstream until it braids." Ryan looked through the haze. "That adds time. It saves ankles." Mason gave a tired breath that was almost a laugh. "I vote for saving ankles." No one laughed loudly, but the tension loosened just enough to let the men move again. They followed the creek upstream, stepping over slick stones and fallen limbs while the rain became mist and the mist became a pale curtain. The light was fading fast now, turning the forest blue. Emily checked the compass, then looked up. A small opening in the cloud cover revealed a thin silver line of evening sky. She used it for less than a second, but Ryan saw the calculation in her eyes. "You are checking the stars already?" he asked. "Not stars," she said. "A gap. Same purpose." There was no arrogance in it. That made it harder for him. If she had gloated, he could have defended himself against her. If she had reminded him of every mistake, he could have met pride with pride. But Emily Carter kept giving the team what it needed and nothing extra. At the braided section of the creek, she crossed first, stepping through shallow water over a bed of small pale stones. She turned and guided Mason across by pointing, not touching, letting him keep his dignity. The others followed. On the far side, the ground rose into a strip of firmer earth lined with old stumps. Emily stopped at the third stump, brushed wet moss from its side, and uncovered a faded orange blaze almost swallowed by time. Commander Hayes let out a quiet breath. "Service road marker." Emily nodded. "Old one." Ryan stared into the trees ahead. For the first time, he could see it. Not a road yet, but the suggestion of one, a long, unnatural straightness in the forest, a corridor where the trees grew younger than the timber around them. Hope moved through the team carefully, as if nobody wanted to say it too soon. They followed the old line south. The ground held. Mason's limp eased. The roar of dangerous water faded behind them. After another quarter mile, Ryan's radio cracked once, then again. A voice broke through the static, distant but real. "Team 2, this is training control. If you copy, transmit location." Everyone stopped. The radio operator looked at Hayes, eyes wide. Hayes looked to Emily. She took one final reading from the compass, then looked toward the road line, the slope, and the faint glow gathering beyond the trees. "Old Service Road 7, she said. "North Spur, roughly 1.2 miles from the secondary extraction gate." The operator repeated it into the radio. Static answered first. Then the voice returned, clearer. "Confirmed. We have you. Continue south. Lights are active at the gate." No one moved for a second. They simply stood there, wet, cold, and stunned by the sound of being found. Emily closed the compass and started walking again. This time, even Ryan did not hesitate. The trees thinned slowly, then suddenly, and the first amber lights appeared through the fog like stars placed low to the ground. The secondary extraction gate stood beyond a chain barrier, its floodlamps glowing against the rain. A rescue vehicle waited there with its engine running, but by the time the team reached it, nobody felt rescued by the vehicle. They looked back at the dark forest, then at the old compass in Emily's hand. Ryan removed his helmet and held it at his side. His voice was rough when he finally spoke. "Lieutenant." Emily turned. He looked at the compass, then at the silver falcon badge on her chest, and whatever joke he might have made in the morning was gone from him now. "You brought us home." Emily's expression stayed calm, but her eyes softened by the smallest measure. "The land did," she said. "I just listened." By the time the team returned to the compound, the rain had softened into a cold mist that clung to the floodlights and turned every shadow silver. No one spoke much during the ride back. The vehicle heater hummed under the silence while wet gloves, dead screens, and mud-dark boots told the story better than any report could. Ryan Cole sat across from Emily Carter with his helmet between his knees, looking at the old compass resting in her palm. In the morning, he had seen brass, scratched glass, and a leather cord worn thin by age. Now he saw weight, not physical weight, but the kind carried by things that had already survived the moment everyone else doubted them. Emily did not polish it or display it. She simply dried the glass with the edge of a cloth, checked the hinge, and slipped it back near the silver falcon badge on her chest. At the debrief, Commander Nathan Hayes stood at the front of the room while the team gathered around a long metal table. Their modern equipment lay across it in a quiet line. 2 dead wrist displays, 1 damaged tablet, 3 radios with water beading in the seams, and a drone controller still searching for an aircraft it could not find. At the far end of the table, Ryan placed his own GPS unit down with a controlled hand. The screen was black. Nobody needed to explain what that meant. Hayes reviewed the exercise without drama. He spoke about weather, terrain, communication failure, route adaptation, and team discipline. Then he paused and looked toward Ryan. "Chief Cole," he said, "assessment." Ryan stood slowly. A few hours earlier, he would have given a clean tactical answer. He would have spoken about system interference, alternate routing, and environmental complications. Those things were true, but they were not the whole truth. He looked at Mason Reed's wrapped ankle, at the damp uniforms around the table, and finally at Emily, who stood near the back wall with her hands folded behind her, quiet as ever. "I trusted the newest tools in the room," Ryan said. Lieutenant Carter trusted the truest ones. The room stayed still. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small microfiber cloth. He walked to Emily, stopped at attention, and held it out with a respect that did not need volume. "For the compass," he said. "I figured it earned better care than my attitude gave it." Emily looked at the cloth, then at him. For the first time that day, she allowed the faintest smile to touch her face. She accepted it with a nod. "Tools do not need apologies," she said. Ryan swallowed once. "People do." That was the moment the room changed. Not loudly, not with applause, just a quiet shift in posture, in eyes, in the way every man there understood what had been proven without a speech. Hayes stepped forward and placed a paper map beside the dead electronics. It was old, creased, and marked with faded service roads that most current systems had forgotten. "Starting tomorrow," he said, "every navigation block includes analog route recovery. Compass, terrain, weather, water, stars, and memory. Lieutenant Carter will lead the instruction." No one objected. Mason gave a small grin. "Good," he said. "I would like to know how she heard a creak before I did." A few quiet laughs moved through the room, not mocking this time, but warm with relief. Emily opened the compass one last time. The needles settled north beneath the scratched glass, steady under the fluorescent lights. She looked at the team, then at Ryan. "Never trust a tool because it is new," she said. "Trust the person who still knows what to do when every tool goes quiet." Later, when the room emptied and the equipment was carried away for repair, the old compass remained on the table for a moment beside the black GPS screen. Brass beside plastic. Memory beside signal. The difference was simple now. One had failed when the storm arrived. The other had waited patiently for someone humble enough to follow it. From that day on, nobody called it a relic. Nobody called it cute. Among the men who had walked out of that forest behind Emily Carter, it earned a different name, spoken softly and never as a joke. They called it home.